What's funny is that every time I watch that little intro video, I realize that I wear this shirt a lot, and it's a really good flannel shirt. I got it, I guess, not long before our campaign started in 2019, and I've really worn it a lot over the last year working from home. So thanks for tuning in. Welcome to our official map chat. So today, I'm going to give you a recap of the last couple of weeks, and we can talk about stuff in the last couple of months if you're interested, but specifically the last couple of weeks up to today, and then we'll talk about what happens next, right? If you have questions or comments along the way, please drop them in the chat or in the comments if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube. Either way, I should be able to see them, and I will try to answer them as we go along. So what happened, we'll say, roughly 2 weeks ago at the beginning of April, is that on April 4th, Easter Sunday, was the deadline for the public to submit maps to the House and Senate redistricting committees as our gesture, as our effort to help inform the process about redrawing our state legislative districts, our state House and our state Senate districts here in Oklahoma. This is, from everything that I've researched or read or heard, this has not ever happened before, right? This is the first time the legislature has allowed the public to be this involved and has invited the public to submit maps, which is a good thing. Now, whether or not they truly listen to us or weigh what anyone has submitted or said is a whole nother matter, but at least they're doing the thing. Like, that is an incremental progress that is way far away from the gold standard of having an independent redistricting commission. But for right now, this is what we got, and we'll take it, right? So we, along with a number of others, submitted maps for consideration. That was in early April. And then last week, they invited, I think, everybody who submitted a map to come to the state legislature, to the House and to the Senate redistricting committees, and to present our maps to the committees. So the Senate meeting was last Tuesday. It was fine. There were 9 maps submitted overall. Only 6 people came to present them. And it was really interesting. It was really cool, I think, to see these other maps, right? And so the process, both chambers kind of had their own rules that were mostly the same for how you submit maps. You had to send them the files if you had them, right? But then also upload the maps to Dave's redistricting app, or it's davesredistricting.org, and then send them the URL for that. So that's a really great way because it's a free resource, and it's a good way to make those maps public and for all of us to be able to compare apples to apples, right? So the professor, I forget his last name, Austin, I think was his first name, from OSU, that was a fascinating guy that did his maps based about optimization and really trying to apply some sound data practices to how districts get drawn. Was fascinating, right? It really shows us from a purely data perspective of how these districts get drawn, specifically trying to weigh or to prioritize not splitting counties, right? So counties are a very important political division in our state, right? Particularly in rural areas, maybe more so than in Oklahoma City or Tulsa metros. But so his method was really interesting. And then you had everyone from, this PhD professor that's doing it in this super algorithmic model down to a high school student who had been a page at the state Senate just a few weeks ago, I think. And he tried his hand at drawing the maps too. And so he had this wide range of experience, right? You had people like Pat McFerrin, who's a longtime politico in Oklahoma. Most of you who pay attention to the legislature have probably heard his name at some point or another. He submitted a map for the Senate. He didn't come present his, but he submitted a map. And then you've got a lady from Southwest Oklahoma from an organization there that submitted a map. You had Dan Williams, who used to work for the House redistricting staff. He submitted a map. Smart dude. And he and I had talked about it as we were drawing it and wrestling with things. And we approached it from 2 different angles, which I think were complementary of one another. And so I hope that over all of these, 9 versions that the Senate saw, and I think there were 6 or 7 in the House, that it really helped inform the process. On the House side, Representative Mark Lawson submitted a map. He's on the committee, but he and some of the other members are really interested in this, and so they submitted their own maps as well, in addition to the one that the committee is putting forth, which I think is an interesting way. Like, kudos to them for being involved and really wanting to practice what you preach and to understand how difficult redistricting can be, the things you have to weigh, the decisions you have to make. Now, ideally, we would have done our map with a balanced commission of people, right, from around the state: 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats, 3 everybody else, independents, libertarians, anything else. I would have loved to have done it as close to the policy that we had laid out in our initiative petition as we could. Now, there's some barriers, like COVID being one, lack of resources, right? We don't have the state budget behind us to help fund our redistricting efforts. And additionally, some of the rules that the legislature set forth for submission were non-compatible with our policy. For example, our policy would actually include using voter registration data, partisan information, to make sure that the districts are not drawn to unduly favor or disfavor any particular party, right? But the legislature said, we're not using partisan data. And that may be a convenient talking point for them, but that doesn't mean it's the best way to draw maps, right? So there's that. Particularly because I think we typically assume that politicians are going to use political data to draw maps to be more political. And in our policy, it was written to make sure that maps are drawn to be less compatible, or less political, more competitive, if that's a distinguishing mark. So the flip side of that is that they also were explicitly considering where incumbents live, which of course makes sense, right? This is politicians drawing maps for people who are in those districts now. Of course, they're not going to draw themselves out of a district, right? That very rarely does it happen. And if it does, it's like a political hit job, right? So the flip side of that is that our policy explicitly would not concern itself with where incumbents live. And in fact, when we drew our maps, I didn't go through the hassle of trying to look up everybody to see if we drew anyone out of their district. And I'm sure it happened. Dan Williams, whom I mentioned a minute ago, did use that data to draw his maps and acknowledged in some of the presentations that in some cases it led to districts looking a little wonky because he was trying to include the incumbent in that particular district. So that is awfully tough when there are some districts in the state that needed to go away, right? Because population in that area did not support having sufficient districts. So either that district goes away or things get reshuffled into a way that looks a little odd. Now, when we set about drawing our maps, we wanted to make them as compatible as we could with what the state legislature was doing. And so, as many of you know, we had raised money to purchase the same software they were using. It's called Maptitude, and it's about $10,000, right? And did that, spent a lot of hours learning how to use it, lots of time kind of just practicing and working on that, talking to folks that have used it. So we did that, and then we took the data from that and then uploaded it into Dave's redistricting so we could submit it. And this is an important step because the way that Dave's does it is it's a free resource. And so they have to disaggregate some of the data, which means that they're kind of estimating how many people are in some of the precincts. And our method used the actual data from the American Community Survey in the same way that the state legislature is using that data. So it really is a direct apples to apples comparison. And it honestly would be, I believe, would be more accurate than probably what some of the other folks that submitted maps did if they were just using Dave's. That's not to say their maps weren't good enough, but ours was a mathematically more accurate way to do it. So we did that. We also set about trying to draw our maps to be as compact as we could. And we did that by looking at population centers, right? So you're looking at larger cities and towns, and focusing on redistricting those first, and then kind of moving out from there in concentric circles. So obviously you'd start with Oklahoma City and Tulsa because those are the largest cities, but then also places like Norman, Stillwater, Ardmore, Enid, Weatherford, Woodward, Ada, McAllister, Muskogee, Tahlequah, Idabel, right? Like all of these cities, Bartlesville, and you start kind of moving out. And then in most rural counties, often it's the county seat is the most populated city there. And so you kind of start there and then start adding in census blocks or block groups until you get to the ideal number of people, right? That's the however many it is for that chamber, and kind of go from there. And that also allows us to really look at, what is the core of a district? And I think it's occurred to me along the way that often when we talk about maintaining the core of a district, people have said that in regards to the core of like the historic core, as in where has this district been drawn historically? Well, population has shifted a lot over the last 10, 20, 50 years, right? And so just because a district has been, a district number 27 or 99 or whatever has been drawn in a particular part of town, it's not like folks are wearing jerseys with that district number, right? It's not like it's a football team that they support. It just happens to be the district that happens to be numbered a certain number at the time they live there. And it may change over time. And in many cases, it definitely has. And so really what we find is that the core of a district is the people, right? It's the people who live there. And so by starting with the population centers, like where the most people in that district live, you get to understand that like this is the core of the district. It's the people who live there. It is the communities of interest in that district. And that's super important. So it is not necessarily what a district looked like in the past, and it's certainly not where an incumbent today happens to live. Almost no one who is in the legislature today was there 10 years ago when we drew maps, and most of these folks won't be there in 10 years from now. Many of them won't be there 6 years from now. So why would we draw districts to ensure that they are still in the district when many of them won't be there, right? It's just silly. And I get it from a politician's perspective, but from everybody else in Oklahoma, it seems ridiculous. So then we looked at maximizing minority representation and we'll say ensuring that we weren't accidentally dividing any communities that should be lumped together. So we kind of did that first pass by looking at population centers and roughing out the state map as a whole. And then we went back through and like layered on, racial and ethnic demographic data. According to federal law, like you have to have districts that where population, how to phrase this, where minority populations are sufficient enough that they can be a majority of a district, then they should be allowed to have a majority of a district to elect someone from their community to represent them, which makes total sense. However, you can't explicitly like pack them into a district just for the purposes of forming that district. And so, those are called packing and cracking. Those are two ways, very common ways that politicians would gerrymander maps. And so when we looked at the districts, we came back and with only minor tweaking, realized that we had maintained all the districts we needed to and resulted in, I think, as good of a racial, ethnic, majority minority district population in our state as we could. For the House, we ended up with 8 districts that were not majority white. 2 of them were majority black, 73 and 97. And then in the Senate, there were 4 majority minority districts, districts 11, 44, 45, and 48. And I have all the statistics, like in case anyone is interested in what that looks like what the percentage of each racial or ethnic group was in that. And if you go on Dave's Redistricting, you can look at our map too. It's all public, right? You can see it, which is a very key point that I will come back to in a few minutes when we talk about what happened today. Once we went through all that and all that was drawn and defined, we went back through to make sure that nothing was amiss in some other way, right? And the state as a whole increased in population, but that was not equal everywhere, right? Like some places went up, some places went down. And so you had to make sure that all the districts still made sense. So for the Senate, that ended up that all the districts that we drew were within 0.5% of that ideal number, right? You take the population, you divide it by the number of districts, that's your target number. And they've given a plus or minus 2.5% buffer around that. For us, plus or minus 0.5% is how close we got it in the Senate. That we did that while minimizing the number of times counties were split and protecting all of the majority-minority districts and ensuring that we had almost as most competitive map as you can have. Dave's redistricting, when they draw the maps, they use an algorithm and they don't care about anything else. They draw it, they'll do one version that is explicitly to be the most competitive. And in their most competitive model, there's only 12 districts that were competitive, and in ours there were 11. And so we had almost as many competitive districts, and we maximized the other metrics that we wanted to maximize. So it was a very well-balanced, I thought, a really great map. We did not consider partisanship, as I said, but afterwards you go back and look at it, you're like, oh, hey, turns out we did okay. So that worked out well. So last Tuesday, we presented at the Senate, had a few questions that was expected. One thing pointed out, Senator John Michael Montgomery from Lawton pointed out to me and several of the other submitters that our maps separated Fort Sill from Lawton proper. That was not something that I even checked for when we went through it. And it's a point well taken. Apparently there's been kind of a long-standing agreement that they would be in the same district. And I think, that's the thing that you go back and say, oh, great feedback. Let's update that and make a few tweaks to make that happen. A very reasonable thing. In any time you're drawing a map like this, the moment you put your pen down or your cursor down and you think, okay, I'm done, inevitably you're going to see something that you wish you could change. And my hope is after today, the legislature does the same thing, that they go back and they tweak a few things once they receive feedback. So everyone presented last week. And then yesterday afternoon late, they announced that today there would be a press conference at which the legislature would reveal their districts. And indeed they did today at 1:00. They shared them. It was a very, a typical press conference. They kind of rushed through their talking points, answered some questions, and they put the maps up on the House and Senate redistricting website. Unfortunately, they've only posted them. They posted every district as a PDF, which is arguably my least favorite document format. It's basically a graphic, so you can look at that district, but you don't know where it sits on the state or what's around it. And each district, depending on how big or small it is, varies the amount of detail that's provided in that PDF. Now, both chambers did also put their maps on their GIS interactive website, so you can zoom in, you can click on each district, and it gives you some demographic data, but not as much as Dave's redistricting. And so I sent emails during the call because they said you can email and ask for the data. And so I did ask for the CSV files so I can, look at it more detailed and compare it and, pull out districts and honestly, so that we can compare what they're proposing to what all the other public people proposed using the same platform. And so far they've kind of given me the runaround. So I'm going to keep emailing about that. I know many people are out there working to draw the maps in Dave's already. Kudos to you. Somebody named Chris I saw on there had already put the Senate map up and I think was working on the House map. There's still like a few little things that need to be cleaned up, but that's immensely helpful to get, a basic look at districts. But I really think that we, the people, should be able at this stage to compare apples to apples to ensure that what they've proposed is accurate. It isn't unduly damaging or splitting of counties or of communities of interest. And I think if you look at the map, just a cursory glance, the first thing that stood out to me is that it looks pretty similar to the old map, right? And maybe this is the deal. And this was honestly the core of the sentiment of our statement that we released about this. is that if you are totally satisfied with the status quo, as I know, I suspect many of the politicians that serve in the state legislature are, then you don't really have an incentive to change the maps, right? Like, why? Let's not rock the boat. Let's just tweak the districts a little bit, but keep them basically in the same area, and make sure that we stay in our districts, and then we can go from there. And so I'm gonna real quick, for the few of you who are watching, I think I can share this so that you can see what they've done. Let me Chrome tab. Here we go. Okay, so we're going to share this, and as I think you can see right here, ooh, that's nice, right here on the screen. This is the state legislature's GIS website, okhouse.maps.arcgis.com. For those of you who are mapping legends, I know I have many friends out there that actually do this for a living. This is where you can poke around at the data. So if you click on this little stacked button here for layers, you can see it has the county boundaries. You can turn on or off. So it's the labels, I guess. Oh, and a white dotted line boundary. And then proposed House and current House, proposed Senate, and current Senate. So right now I have both the current and proposed districts on. So if I hide that, we'll hide the counties too. So you can see this is the House map as a whole, and if you layer on the proposed districts, they are black lines. So as you might notice, like we're not going to go super in depth because we don't have time for that. And whoa, my trackpad is a little touchy this evening. We don't have time to do that, and you can do it on your own. But if you turn on the newly proposed maps, you can see in some cases, like for example, House District 61 and the Panhandle it's the red area currently, and so they added in this space here. They had to pick up some people, and so picking some people up from Woodward as the closest place, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's interesting if you turn on county boundaries, you can also see that, okay, well, it follows the county lines, and here's where it used to go, which formerly followed the Ellis County boundaries, but now it's got to pick up some area, so they have to kind of scooch in a little bit. Most folks are interested in, Lawton area and what's happening down there. So let me turn off the proposed. So again, here's this is Comanche County. Here's Lawton. White lines are counties. This is the current districts as they sit now, and you can turn on the proposed. And so you see District 62 really gets bigger here. 64 kind of shrinks a little bit. There was some feedback in the town hall meetings that they held in Comanche County that folks wanted Lawton to be divided between districts. And so there it is. I will be interested to, if you click on them now, so this is proposed 62. So you can see on the left, how much is deviated from the population, and how big it is, who the current representative is, and some of the racial and ethnic demographics. Not all of them. Also, this only tells us, I think, total population, and I assume, because it doesn't say, I assume that these percentages are based on total population and not on total voting age population, which is different. And that's one of the things that's important to consider, right? Is not how many people, but how many voters. And likewise, you shouldn't just consider voters, you should consider total population. So that's one of those things that having this data in Dave's redistricting would be really easy to compare. Likewise, click on 64, you can see the same thing here. And so you can kind of see how those districts shake out now. And I think because that's the top layer, it only shows us whatever the top layer is. So if we zoom on into, we turn off the proposed, looking into the Oklahoma City Metro, this is the current districts. Here's 87. This is Cindy Munson's district. I forget whose is who. I think this is 88 here. So this must be Colin Walkie's. I don't know. And so if we turn on the proposed boundaries, you can see, again, like Cindy Munson's district gets a little bit bigger here, but a little bit smaller right there. So it's basically the same shape. You know, a lot of these, 88 stays roughly the same, 87 stays roughly the same, 84 is roughly, and they're all kind of close to the same. There are a few things that really shift around that weren't there before because of how the population has moved. So Canadian County out here is a big deal because population has boomed out here. There's been a lot of changes that have occurred. Likewise, up in North Oklahoma County, Edmond, West Edmond, Deer Creek, Piedmont area out here, a lot of kind of shuffling around where some of these, like this whole area, really had to get kind of cut up. Although the way that they've done it is really tough to discern. And I think if you look at District 96 here, holy moly, that's a weird looking district. So this is 1 mile wide right here from, oh, that looks like this is Kelly, or maybe this is Kelly. And then this is all the car dealerships along there, and maybe getting close to Oklahoma Christian over there. So this really kind of follows the turnpike and follows Memorial Road, right? That runs, this is Memorial Road right here. This is 122nd, so it kind of runs along there and lumps them in. So that's an interesting decision. And again, these are things that I think would be good for us to really examine if we had the data. To scooch up, well, let's look at, here's something I want to point out. So I had some feedback from people, and I don't know if they were successful in getting it to the legislature, but people who live in Langston, in the Black community there, who said they really wanted Langston and Guthrie to be in the same district because the Black population in those two towns has a lot in common, does a lot of things together, considers themselves one community of interest. And I don't know that we had that on our map, to be honest, because I didn't talk to them until just the other day. After we had submitted our maps, they found out about this whole thing and wanted to make their voice heard. I've encouraged them and put them in contact with their state legislators. But if that's you, like if there are things about your community or about these maps that you see that you think is really important and you haven't yet taken the time to contact your state legislator, you definitely should, because they haven't voted on these yet. They're scheduled to vote on these maps next Wednesday, which is the 28th, right? And so if you have opinions, thoughts, feelings, questions, now is the time to share them with your state legislators. All right, so let's hop back and we'll just look up in Tulsa for anyone who's curious. You can kind of look around. Again, we'll turn off the proposed district so you can see. Let me zoom out a little bit. You can see current districts, and then you can layer over proposed districts. Now, look, this little seahorse-looking district, this pink one here, which is 68. You know, I think we joked that it looks like a seahorse because it does. It would look a little less like a seahorse and more like a pipe wrench, I guess, there. And so you see some that shift a little bit. Again, you know, you just bump outs here and there, but overall districts are kind of in the same place. And by and large, look the same as they did before. You do see some that have now cut through the middle of a county that previously went to the county line. Typically that's because another district had to pick up more people or they had to shed more people to maintain that kind of equilibrium number of people in each district. So now if you're interested in this, I really encourage you to poke around on the website. We can glance at the Senate just in case anyone is really eager about that. Let's go. So this is Senate districts. Let me turn off counties. Senate districts. If you've been following us for a while, you remember some of these because we have joked about them. Like this one that looks like a poodle out here in Western Oklahoma, Senate District 26, that goes from Kingfisher all the way to Texas. And then you've got, let's see what else. Whoa. My thing is so touchy. There's just, well, if you zoom in here, of course, Senate District 30 I have a cutout of this one, this costume that I can wear. This is the Senate district in which I live, and it has changed substantially. Here, I'll show you. Actually, you look and see. Whoops. So the proposed, why did that come on? Well, it's supposed to pop up, and it hasn't. Maybe, how do I deselect? Well, I apologize. The Senate district is not pulling up. Let me refresh, see if this helps. Turn off those, turn on State Senate. There we go. All right, let me zoom back in. So as we were saying, here are the current Senate districts. This would be 30, 40, 47, 22 that just had an election. And if you layer on the proposed, you can see Senate District 30, which was this meandering light blue area, is now this compact area. Honestly, they announced that it was, or it is proposed to be the smallest district, or the district with the smallest perimeter. So it went from being one of the least compact districts to being one of the most compact districts by certain measures. So there's 30, 40 then, which was this green one, kind of moves on top. 47 loses its western limb and becomes more compact up here, which makes sense. That's also a good seat. That's Pro Tem Greg Treat's seat, so that probably solidifies his base a little bit and protects him. And then Senate District 22 loses the southern end of Yukon there and is really mostly Piedmont, West Edmond, Deer Creek area there. And then, Senate District 46, which is Kay Floyd's district, I think, it shifts a little bit. It was this one here, and it now would be, so it moves from the kind of middle of Oklahoma City to go all the way out to Del City, and even all the way down to Southside, south on 240. That's a long stretch from, so it would be up here and include like all of Mesta Park, I guess, Mesta Park and like Paseo and all of that, and then also lump that in with like Del City and Midway Village and go almost all the way to Tinker. That's a big stretch. Those are very different parts of town. District 48 stays relatively the same, shifts a little bit. 45. Anyway, you get the idea. Now I'm just meandering, right? So if you have any questions, again, if you're watching on this, please drop them in the chat. I'm happy to try to answer them as best I can. But I'm now going to talk about what happens next, like what's the next steps in this redistricting process. And that is that next Wednesday, the 28th, the Senate for sure, and I think the House are both scheduled to vote on these. So that gives us 1 week between now and then to provide feedback to your state representative, your state senator, and anyone on the committees that you want to reach out to, right? If you care about this, if you have anything to say, the more you can say, the better. If you're not sure who to contact, then contact me or anyone here at People Not Politicians, and we will help connect you with the right person that represents you, so you can talk to them about your thoughts, feelings, concerns, questions, whatever it is. This is the time. We rarely get a full week to advocate or to provide feedback on any bill. And if you've been watching what's happening, I'm sure literally as I'm talking right now, the legislature has been doing floor substitutes and committee substitutes and really just cramming some bills right down the people's throats without literally any time for us to even know what language is in the bill. Suddenly, bam, new language right in that bill, and they vote on it, and it's a law, or it goes to the governor's desk, and everyone is trying to figure out what happened. That is not the case with these redistricting bills. This is our chance to really provide some feedback. So that's next Wednesday, between now and next Wednesday. Next Thursday, the 29th, Um, Once they vote on the bills, they have to go to the floor of their individual committee or chambers. So I think what will happen is they will vote in committee on Wednesday, and then it'll go to the floor for each chamber on Thursday. Then it'll cross, and then next week, or the week after, the first week in May, it'll be heard in the opposite chamber committee and floor, right? So we've got basically a 2-week or week and a half to 2-week window before these are sent to the governor, which provides some time for things to be tweaked. So next Wednesday is the first deadline. Thursday the 29th, that afternoon at 2:30, we are partnering with the League of Women Voters of Oklahoma to host a people-powered Fair Maps rally at the Capitol, a day of action. And man, it's been a minute since we've done one of those because of COVID. So come, it'll be socially distanced, wear your masks, all that stuff. I will provide an update then. We have some other guest speakers. We've got some poetry with some live music. If you haven't registered to vote or need an update for some reason, we'll have forums, of course. You can do that there. But it should be kind of a fun time. So we'll share more information about that on our Facebook page and our Twitter and all that stuff here the next few days. But please come. That's Thursday the 29th at 2:30 at the state capitol in the South Plaza. Then eventually they'll vote. Okay, so they vote, whatever happens. Presumably they will pass some maps for these state legislative districts this session. And then things go quiet for a bit. Over the summer, the legislature has pledged to hold, I think they said 5 town hall meetings. I don't know where, but around the state or virtual or something. Over the summer, I think they will do one in each congressional district, because the point of these town hall meetings is to receive feedback about how these congressional maps should be drawn. And then once the census data is released in August or September, they will draw the congressional maps, and the same process will happen. Now, they have said that they will have a public map submission process, just like they did for the state legislative maps. And at that time, they will come back and tweak or update the state legislative maps as needed, right? So these maps that they propose have been drawn based on population estimate data from the 2015 to 2019 American Community Survey, which is a survey that the U.S. Census Bureau sends out, but it is not the 2020 census, which is the official data source from which redistricting is done. So they're drawing these now, and then in the fall they'll come back and compare these maps to those numbers. Like they'll overlay the actual census data to see if the maps they drew are still within their, fudge factor there. And if they are, then they'll leave them alone. Except, is that really the right thing to do? Like, would they have made the same decisions if they had that data now? Probably not, right? And so we, you, me, whoever's watching, your friends, your family, all of us together have to pay attention and stay involved and make sure that we hold them accountable, and that they actually do look at those maps, do look at that data, and they do adjust the maps as needed. In addition, the congressional maps, which honestly, from what I've heard, is the big prize that a lot of the legislature is worried about, which makes sense when you think that, well, a lot of the leadership is nearing the end of their term. Like they'll term out next year or in 2024, and they could potentially run for a higher office. And well, what's open then? Well, you got congressional seats, right? That are up every 2 years. And so folks that are in the state legislative leadership now are looking at running for Congress in 2 or 4 years. Then they have a very vested interest in how those maps get drawn, which again brings us all back to the point: we should have an independent commission and not let the politicians draw the lines themselves. Boggles the mind. Okay, well, this concludes our first map chat about these new maps. Once I have a chance to get these proposed maps drawn into Dave's redistricting, and I can start comparing apples to apples, and we can get a better look at exactly what they've done and why, we'll do some more of these. If you have questions, please feel free to tag us on Twitter. That's a great way to do it. We are at PNP4OK. You can tag me at AndyOKC. And please use the hashtag MapChat. That's probably already a hashtag. I don't know, but that seems like an appropriate thing to do here. And we will help monitor that. Again, you can send me an email. My email address is andy@letsfixthis.org. That's a great way to get a hold of me. Happy to answer questions, get you connected with the right folks. And together we can make the world a better place. Remember, good maps is the first step to having a good government. We got to start there. So, all right, thanks for your attention. Have a good night, and we'll talk to you soon.